Hey everyone, welcome to the Shared Cup podcast. This is episode 2, where we get to hear the conclusion from Virginia Depp's story last episode and learn the outcome of the surgery for her baby Madi. We also get to hear Virginia share about the life-changing story of what happened in the hospital room. I'm Alison Liddic, and this podcast is for women who want to experience the overflowing love of God through our own stories. We pray that you are blessed by this message. Hello and welcome to our show. This is part 2 of our interview with Virginia Depp. Welcome back, Virginia.
Hi, happy to be here.
Thank you for coming back and meeting with us one more time just to finish your story. Everyone loved the first part, so thank you for sharing that about Madi.
Thank you much.
People are like dying to know the rest of the story, what happened to Madi, and then we would also like to know the hospital story. We want to dive into that and just learn more. So just for everybody that wasn't on the last episode, definitely check it out. It's on the podcast list. It's on YouTube as well on our channel. But let me just kind of high level, and Virginia, please correct me if I say anything wrong, but what she shared last time was about finding out about her daughter Madi that was missing part of her brain. And where we left off was where Madi went into surgery and the devastating news that you had received right before that. And you told the great analogy about Holland and seeing the tulips in your situation, which I loved that so much. Let's jump back in and start wherever you feel is appropriate. But we definitely want to learn what happened to Madi and the lesson that you learned in the hospital room, because you said it was life-changing.
Oh, it was. Well, yeah, I love to share the story. And as I said before, I love to encourage people and hopefully increase their faith and just share my life experiences. It's not that I think my story is any more valuable than the next person. I truly believe all of us have several stories that we could use to uplift and encourage other people. And so I hope everybody is sharing their story. And that's why I'm so thankful for what you're doing, Alison, to give people a voice and to use your talents and gifts to encourage other people to live their best life. So again, I'm really grateful to be here. I think last time I was talking about just being on top of the world and that 6-minute phone call that took me to the deepest pit I had ever experienced. And I can tell you that our daughter, we ended up finding a hospital, which was Children's Hospital in Cincinnati. And I had said it was one of the top 10 children's hospitals in the world. She ended up having surgery when she was 14 weeks old, and they went through the roof of her mouth. And if you can just picture a tiny 14-week-old baby and them going through the roof of her mouth to perform this extremely rare surgery. Again, she was the youngest in the world and still is to have ever had the surgery. And it was life-changing for me, mainly because I was put in a place that I'd never been before. It wasn't a place I chose to be. Most of my life, the places I've gone, the things I've done have been things that I wanted to do or I chose to be there. And that was definitely not on my agenda or my husband's agenda. It wasn't anything that we had planned. And yet it was one of the most moving and rewarding places, life-changing places that I've ever been. And so if that can be an encouragement to someone, it's that sometimes we are taking places that we weren't expecting and we didn't want to be. But I believe that God uses every experience, and I know He has in my life, to teach me and mold me and shape me. And so this was definitely one of those moments. We went to Children's Hospital and handed our baby over for surgery. And when we saw her again, prior to seeing her, they said, we're going to try to put a catheter in her spine to relieve some of that fluid off of her brain, so that when we go in her mouth and we try to replace that bone and fill in where her skull is, we want it to be able to move. And so we're going to try everything we can to relieve some of that pressure through a catheter. But if that doesn't work, we're going to have to shave her head, and we will have to put a shunt in her head, and she's probably going to look really different the next time you see her. And my baby was born with this head full of beautiful dark hair. And I tell people she came out of the womb with a bow in it, and I had a bow in her hair. She was never without a bow. So I just couldn't even imagine her little head and what that might be. But I was, as best I could prepare for that, I did try to do that. She ended up having surgery. It was quite long, lengthy surgery. She was put in intensive care on a unit all by herself. And so when they took us back to see her, they had the clergy of the hospital walk my husband and I back. And I know most of us have seen little babies in these little plastic beds.
Mm-hmm.
They had her on a full-size bed. So you picture a 14-week-old baby in a hospital bed, like most of us have been in or seen someone in, and she just looked tiny. And they had her in this bed because they had all these machines around her. She was on a vent. Because her surgery was through the roof of her mouth, they actually put a string through her tongue and had pulled her tongue out and tied the string to that because of how the surgery was. So I can't even describe it other than to say she had blood dripping out of her nose. And she was on a ventilator, so she was not moving. But they led us back, and the hospital personnel, there was probably 8 technicians of some kind, all standing. And I think they were honestly there in case mom had a total faint or meltdown, and dad too. But they kind of all watched our reaction as they are leading us up to her bed. And it was frightful to me. I was so thankful she was alive. Again, even though with the surgery, we still didn't know what to expect the outcome of her life would be. And honestly, that's something every parent, wonders throughout their child's life. None of us are guaranteed anything. But that was a new reality for me, that I just got over that hurdle. And then the next thing to see was to see what happened. Well, as she was in this unit all by herself, they had put her name up over her bed, and it said Madison. And they do that in children's hospitals because they really want the doctors and nurses to come in and refer to the children by name. That's my Madison, that's not Agenesis of the Corpus Callosom, morning glory syndrome, and, all these other terms. This is my baby. And so my husband and I brought a picture of her that we had done, and we put it up with it so they could see her in clothes and all the things that, she's a real baby to us. She's our baby. And so we were in the hospital for quite some time. We were on the unit all by ourselves. And the way my husband and I deal with things is different than everybody. And so everybody deals with things differently. And for our family, my husband and I always tried to find a purpose for anything negative that happens. We try to say, okay, how are we going to make this good? How are we going to find our tulips? And so throughout this experience, when we learned that she would be going to the hospital, possibly the funeral home, we said, no matter where this journey takes us, funeral home, hospital, wherever, we're going to help other people. We're going to encourage them. We know there's a greater purpose than just that. And so for whatever reason, we're going to be in an ICU unit of a children's hospital that I would have never chosen to go to. And we're going to make the most of it and try to love on other people or figure out our purpose in being there besides the ultimate purpose, which was for our daughter. And so while we were in the hospital, we kind of made it our mission, because our daughter was on a ventilator. She was sedated. There wasn't any holding her. We never left her, never left the hospital at all, slept there. But we tried to interact with people because oftentimes the doctors and nurses would be making their rounds and they would make us leave the unit. And so we would meet other parents of children and be able to correspond and talk to them. Well, one day I was there in the hospital room with Madi by myself. And again, we were on this unit by ourselves. There's all glass walls. And I saw them come in and put the sign of the little girl's name that was going to be in the bed in the room next to her. And it was a Sunday. And it said Danielle. And I said to the nurse that was working with our baby, I said, "Oh, I see there's going to be another child on the unit with us." And she said, "Yeah, she'll be coming in later today." And I said, "Oh, I didn't realize that they did surgeries on Sunday," because in my limited thinking, I thought everybody came to Children's Hospital to have surgery. That's why my child came. So surely that's
Right.
what's going to happen. And she said, "No, we don't typically do surgeries on Sunday, but sometimes children are on another unit. And if they get worse, this is where they come." And so I thought to myself, oh, this is where they come to die. And I started just really thinking about this child. And before I knew it, I see them wheel her by. And she looks like she's maybe 14 years old, and her head is on a great big teddy bear. And so they wheel her in, and they come and they pull the drape. So I can't look over. I'm like totally into it, and I'm trying to figure out what's going on. But they pull the curtain and they leave about a 3-inch gap, which is all I needed. But I see her parents come by, and I can size them up that they're her parents. Their heads are hanging. Her father is pulling a wagon filled with some kind of medical supplies. And I can tell they are in a pit. And this whole time from my daughter's diagnosis until now, I would often describe it as being in the pit, that I had that fall to the pit. I'd never been in the pit before. And I could totally relate to them for the first time ever. And for me, there's a verse in the Bible, it's in the 103rd Psalm, and it says, "He redeems my life from the pit and crowns me with love and compassion." And I was definitely somebody that lived at the house with the white picket fence. When somebody's head's low and something bad happens to them, I typically would say, "I can't relate. I don't even know what to say." And I could identify with them because I knew they were in the pit. And maybe the circumstance was totally different, but they were there and I was there. And so before long, the doctors were making their rounds, and they had us clear the unit. And my husband and I actually got to have lunch with her parents. And we shared a lot. And they had spent years and years of their daughter's life in and out of hospitals and needed a lot of medical supplies and different things. And her mother shared with me over lunch. She looked at me and I said, "Listen, we want to pray for Danielle. I want to pray for your family." And she said, "Please do, because I'm really worried this time." And when she said this time, I just wondered, what were all the times that he had over the course of this little girl's life? And her parents decided, it was a beautiful spring day, and her parents decided to go for a walk. And they said, "We're going to go out. We can't get in to see her yet, and maybe we'll have dinner together later." And so I went back with my husband, and we were able to get in and sit with our daughter. And I was sitting there, and I could see through that 3-inch crack that there was activity going on in Danielle's room. And before I knew it, over the loudspeaker, they were sending out a code of some kind. And I saw doctors and nurses and all kinds of technicians begin flooding into Danielle's room. And I could see them jumping on top of her bed. And they came in yelling at my husband and I to clear the unit, clear the unit. And so I knew what was happening. And my greatest fear was, I'm going to run into Danielle's mother, and I'm going to know what's happening. And she hasn't a clue what is happening with her little girl. So we were very concerned about our daughter. They had tried to remove the ventilator and get her to breathe on her own earlier that day. She wasn't able to do that. And so I wasn't in the best of mental state. And so I just stood outside the unit. They shut the doors, and there are doors like probably in a school classroom where you can see just this one pane of glass. And I could see doctors crying, and they were covered in sweat. I mean, it was traumatic. And again, they were paging Danielle's parents over the loudspeaker. They were paging the clergy over the loudspeaker. And so I'm standing there and I know what is going on, and I'm just waiting because I didn't want to leave my daughter's side too far.
Right.
And I see them lead Danielle's parents in to tell her goodbye. And her mother looks like she has been hit in the gut with a baseball bat. And I can totally remember that same feeling of being hit in the gut with a baseball bat. I couldn't even stand to walk. I was so devastated in learning about my daughter. And so typically like I said, don't know what to say, but I'm standing there crying, and the clergy comes out these doors, and they've taken Danielle's parents out other doors. And he looks at me and he says, "Are you okay?" Because I wasn't.
Yeah.
And I said, "No, I just feel so bad for that lady. I just feel so bad for her. Could you please just could you just give her my phone number?" And he looked at me like I was totally crazy, and I just might have been. But he kind of pushed me into my husband's arms a little bit, and he went on. And we continued to not be able to get into the unit at all. And at one point I said, "I'm just going to go to the chapel." And so as I'm walking to the chapel through the lobby of the hospital, I see Danielle's mother, and she is out on the blacktop pacing. And the girl that lived at the house with the white picket fence would have never known what to say.
Yeah.
But because of my experience, I knew there was nothing you could say. You could only go up to her and put your arms around her and tell her you love her. And so that's exactly what I did. And as I am hugging her and talking to her and just telling her how sorry I am, and here we just had lunch, 2 hours ago, and I said, "Is there anything that you need? If there is anything I can do for you?" And she looked at me and she said, "I'd really just like your phone number." And so
Wow.
to me, it was just so reassuring that God has us at certain places at certain times for certain reasons. And it was so neat to have that experience with her. And then something that was also just really one of those just moments is we walked in to the person in this busy children's hospital, coming and going. It's Sunday, balloons coming by, flowers being delivered. It's all happening. And we walk up to the registration desk that's there, and I wanted to give her my phone number. And so she walked up, and we said to the guy working the desk, "Can we have a pen and paper?" And he said, "Sure." And he hands the pen and paper, and he said, "Just make sure I get my pen back, lady," to her. And all I could think of was, you have no idea, but that lady just lost her most precious jewel, and you're worried about your ballpoint pen. And I have thought about that over and over and realized how many times in my own life am I so worried about my ballpoint pen while everyone else has so many other problems that are so much bigger and grander. And I have no idea, because I have such a limited view of my own reality and my own experience. And so that's always stood out to me, of just not being worried about the carpet so that I don't have a play group, or worried about what somebody might think if my windows aren't clean and I can't have them over for dinner because I'm looking at the smudges on the window instead of right now. I would invite my whole community into my house, right? Like, we want people. So for me, just that experience of the hospital was so life-changing, and really just gave me a whole new perspective on life and all those things. And all that to say is Danielle and I's mother, we did contact each other. We did talk many times over the year or so. My baby had been given lots of things with angels, and people would bring them to the hospital, and we had them around her crib. And she had a little pin that was an angel with her birthstone, and we actually gave it to Danielle's parents, and she was buried wearing one of Maddie's angel pins. And
Wow.
there's just, a neat connection that can happen that, would I have rather not been at Children's Hospital? Yeah. But would I trade anything for all that taught me? No, I wouldn't. And so if that's an encouragement to anyone, I guess my point is saying, and just that Psalms verse of he redeems my life from the pit and crowns me with love and compassion. And through that pit experience, I do feel like he gave me a crown of love and compassion for other people that I never had before. And am I like the ultimate love and compassion girl? No, especially not with my family and not under quarantine. Okay. But all those experiences make us and shape us. And if we allow God to use all the experiences that we are given, even the yucky pit experiences, hopefully we come out better and looking more like Christ, and also having a deeper faith that only he can bring sometimes through those hard things.
That is incredible. Like you said, not that you would have chosen to be there, and I have to say, just from knowing you, you are so kind and compassionate. And I feel like, come on now.
Okay, see you later.
You have a sense, like, even if we just walk by someone, I feel like you are very sensitive to people's feelings. So would you have that now, had you not been there and had that experience? And man, who knows what other people Danielle's mom had in her life? Maybe she didn't have anybody.
Right.
So God really did use that situation to not only grow you, but you might have been the only support for her.
Right.
Wow.
No, it was really cool. And no, I'm not that compassionate and loving, but I am working on it every day. So
you have the Holy Spirit. Yes, you are.
Yes.
You are kindness and
yes.
compassion.
Yes.
Well, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, I know a lot of people, I'm sure, will learn from that. I know I did, just to be aware and sensitive of others, like the ballpoint pen. Man, how many times are we like that, where what's right in front of our face is the only thing that matters, and we totally miss everything around us?
Well, I think that's one thing that I often will share with people, whether it's your pit that you're just walking around in your everyday life and boom, you're in it, whether it's done this before, pick up my shovel, I've dug my own. I definitely, through that experience, I will say I set up shop in my pit. I decorated, I hung, wallpaper. I mainly did that because I'm typically the cheerleader. I am typically look on the bright side, feel really great about stuff. And in this situation, when we were learning, she'll never walk, she'll never talk, she'll never look at a bird and tell you it's a bird. She's probably going to have, tubes on her of some kind the rest of your life. She'll probably be in a wheelchair. All these things that we were told, besides take her home and love her, she'll probably die. Through that, I knew that disappointment. And so whenever I would be hopeful, or could be like, if a doctor said, she might be able to do these things, or she might have an aide at school and be able to do things, my husband would hear and believe, she is going to do everything. She is going to be a miracle. She is going. And I wanted to believe that. Right. And maybe in my head I would believe it, but I did not speak it because I did not want to make that 6-minute fall again. And so if I can just not expect too much, not expect to live in the, happy world with the white picket fence again, then if it doesn't happen, I don't have to make that fall to the pit. And so I was kind of content living in the pit. And so my husband and I definitely reversed roles, and he was saying, she's gonna go. And now, even in my faith, now I know differently that my words and my faith do matter, and I need to speak what I believe and know. But where I was so many years ago, I didn't know that. And so I just was really protecting my heart. And it was really hard for me to, really believe because of the deep devastation I felt from that 6-minute fall. And so one of the things that I learned, even through the pit experiences, is how to help others when they're in the pit. And so many times we are the person that says, I don't know what to say. I've never been to a funeral. I don't know how to handle that.
Right.
And so we kind of just don't do anything, or I don't know. But one of the things that's real easy to do is to stand at the top of someone's pit. And what do? Call us if you need anything. And then you go. And it's so hard. I always would tell this story, but I remember the day I was getting married, and I had my bridesmaids in the car with me, and thank goodness I wasn't driving, but I'm always being crazy. And so we'd be like, calm, I'm getting married. And some people would have their radio on and they'd just be going about their day, and I'm like, wait a minute, this is my special day. And when you're in the pit, it's kind of like that. Everybody's life is just going on. And I remember going out to breakfast and sitting in a restaurant, and we were getting ready to go meet with the brain surgeon. And my heart just hurt so bad. And I was so sad and devastated. And, having just given birth to a baby, you can only imagine what my hormones
Right.
were
Yeah,
like.
for sure.
But I remember sitting there, and I would look over at the other tables, and their life was going on. They were off to shop or off to do their own thing. And it's just always a reminder to me of having grace for other people and being able to say, yeah, this person maybe did this or that, and that's so annoying. But I say, I have no idea if they're heading to the funeral home to pick out a casket for their mother,
right,
or their child, or what could be happening. And so sometimes I think it's a good reminder for all of us that when we want to be so annoyed about how something was handled by somebody, it's a little bit easier to step back and say, wait a minute, I honestly don't know what they're walking through. And I think especially with this virus and everything that's happening, it's very important that we be mindful of those things, that although it might be easy for us to say, I'll take another vacation, we don't know that somebody else hasn't been saving for that their entire life. So I just think that's a really good lesson to think about.
So something that I want to ask you that you mentioned, I know a lot of people don't necessarily know how to help someone when they're in the pit. Mm-hmm. And I've been the one at the top saying, call me if you need anything, because I don't know how to relate sometimes, mm-hmm. or you don't really know how to help. So what would be some advice that you would give to people that haven't been, I mean, I guess every pit can be different. So what would you recommend as a good way to help someone?
I think for me, the first thing is to realize that not everybody feels love or receives love or that help or support the same way. So if I say, chocolate brownies, bring it on. Like, that is my love language. Reese cups, bring it on. Like, that's great. Whereas someone else would say, that isn't their thing. Right. It's fine, bring them to me. But I think the one thing is to realize that when you say, call me if you need anything, I don't think most people are. I just don't think when you're in the pit, you do that. And I think it's so important for us to know who we are. And so if you are someone that self-isolates and, kind of gets under the covers and pulls the curtains in, realize about yourself. And maybe you do need to reach out, and it is okay. When we say call us if you need anything, typically we really want them to call. So one, realize when you're in a pit, if nobody's calling, call. Do what you've got to do to find the help and support, even if it's through a counselor or a clergy person or, whatever it is. Know who you are. Try your best to own who you are, mm-hmm. and get the help you need. And don't rely necessarily on other people. But as another person, it is realizing that there isn't really a right thing to say. But a lot of it is just saying, I'm here. I want to listen. I want to hug you. If you want to talk. If you want to cry. You want a funny movie, I'll bring it. You want brownies, I'll have it. Want to go for a walk. and just checking in and seeing what they need. And hopefully if you have a relationship with them, they'll be honest to tell you. And I think that's part of it. And pray for them. We have the God of the universe right there, and he can meet their needs better than anything we could ever do.
Right.
And so first and foremost, pray for the person, pray for your heart to be sensitive to the things they need as well.
Yeah,
And
that's good.
God will use all of us to be his hands and feet if we're willing. And sometimes it's just asking, how can I love this person? How can I be there for them? And being willing.
That's good. I like that. Good advice, especially right now with everything that's going on in the world. There are a lot of people that self-isolate anyway. And now that we are being forced to isolate, there might be some people that need a reach out that, you might not usually talk to. So praying and asking God to put those people on your heart is a really good thing as well. Yeah. So, okay. So we want to know Madi. So she's in the hospital bed. Now we can pick up wherever you want on her story, but we want to know, what happened.
Well, Madi ended up coming home, and we started therapy with her right away based on her diagnosis that she was given. We didn't know really what to expect. That was part of the things that I was referring to in, I think, our first meeting, was kind of, because it was such a rare thing, it wasn't like I could say, oh, she has Down syndrome. What are Down syndrome children like? Oh, she had a heart condition. What typically happens to children that have that type of surgery. So there really wasn't any information out there. And I found this telephone book from an agency that talked about children missing that portion of their brain. That was one thing I could figure out.
Wow. Okay.
And so every day my husband would go to work and I would call people. And because we didn't really do internet and all that stuff then, so I would pick up the phone and call these people. And my husband would come home and I would be in a heap on the floor and he would say, "You've been calling people again, haven't you?" And I would say, "Yes." And he would go, "Why are you doing that?" And I'd say, "I just want to find somebody that's going to give me some hope." And I would call and I would say, "Oh, hi, I'm calling about, your phone number and what your little boy is doing." And they would say, "Well, my little boy is doing great. He is fabulous. He is 10 years old and he doesn't have any muscle tone in his fingers, so he can't snap his pants yet, but he's still in diapers, but we are so proud of him. And he rides a tricycle." And here I am holding, my 12-week-old baby or whatever. And I would just think that wasn't what I wanted to hear. And that isn't to take away from their experience and their joy and all those things, but it was not very helpful to me. And I couldn't find anyone. And my husband would say, "What are you doing?" And I would just say, "I want to find somebody that's going to give me some hope." And what ended up happening is we did put her in therapy and we did everything just based on her diagnosis. And she ended up meeting every typical milestone within a typical range. She went to public school and she graduated from high school several years ago. And then she graduated from college and she is a certified teacher in the state of Kentucky. And she lives in Kentucky now, and she has a job that she loves and enjoys and plays the piano and does all the things that God wanted her to do. And so she truly is a living, breathing miracle, as all children are, no matter their capabilities, no matter the milestones. And that's another thing I learned is Madi is a wonderful miracle because she's who God made her to be, regardless of any of the milestones that she meets. And that's true for all of our kids, right?
Right.
So
that is true.
But yeah, she really is a miracle, and we have used her story. She's been published in a devotion book, and I use her story. I was invited back to Children's Hospital in Cincinnati early on to speak to nurses about what they could do in their trainings, to parents that were in the hospital, and just have love that God gave us, that story of hope and encouragement for people. And so I love to speak to moms groups and women's groups and just tailor that even story in and of itself to meet needs, because all of us have pits. All of us know people that are in pits, and all of us need hope and encouragement. And so God has given us that story, and we want to continue to share it. And so I'm just so grateful for the opportunity that you let me share it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And like you were saying, praise God for the outcome with Madi. She is just an amazing young woman.
Yes,
and like you said, there's so many, even though we haven't all been through what you have, we can relate on different levels. So I'm sure any mother can relate with Madi's story, or not even a mother yet, just to get hope from your story and how God worked in Madi, not only in her body, but using her story for his glory and giving you the opportunity, opening doors for you to be a testimony through her and her story, which is just amazing. And I love that 24 years later, you're still using it. Like, to God be the glory, right? It's amazing.
Absolutely.
So thank you for sharing that. I'm glad that we got to hear. We'll throw up a picture, if you don't mind, of Madi. Maybe, do you have a baby picture we could put up of her too?
I'll put some of the,
okay.
I'll get them for you.
Okay, so if you're listening to the podcast, you won't be able to see the picture, but go over to our YouTube channel, which I will put down in the comments. You can see the pictures of Madi. And then Virginia, I know we talked about it on the first episode, but I just want to cover it again because you are a public speaker that can be booked for events, private events, big events. So how do they get
somewhere tropical? As soon as we can fly, but maybe I can do this. I cancel some of my events in April because of this. And I never thought of saying, well, I can do it this way, but.
Yeah. We got to be flexible now.
And I like to see people too. So I will travel.
Okay, great. So how would people find you to book you for a event?
Right now, I have a Facebook page. It's just Virginia Depp. And so we can give you a link for that. We can put that with a picture or something.
Sure. Yeah, I'll put that in the comments. So just search Virginia Depp on Facebook, but I'll put it in the comments as well so people can find you. And then just reach out to Virginia to see if she has availability to be booked.
Speak about that. I have lots of topics that through my life experiences that I've learned and love to share them as well. But all of them I think are hopefully filled with hope and encouragement and motivation sometimes. So
absolutely.
I mean that too.
I am encouraged from hearing your story just now, so I'm sure many, many people will be as well. So thank you for sharing your heart and just being transparent with us today and on episode 1.
Thank you.
Yeah, I appreciate you taking time out of your quarantine to be here with us.
Happy to talk to an adult.
Oh, well, thank you, Virginia. I hope to have you back. Actually, I already have a couple topics I've written down for a future episode. So if you don't mind, I'd love to have you back again.
I'd love to do it. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you for your time.
Okay, bye.
All right, bye. Thank you for joining us today for the Shared Cup podcast. Don't forget to subscribe and remember that each one of us has a story that shows the overflowing love of God. If you want to be a guest on our podcast, put a comment below and we'll send you the link to apply. Have a blessed day and thank you so much for joining us.